Welcome to the cube. The cube is a concept, defined by the physical space itself. The first time I found myself in the cube was during the pandemic, unsurprisingly. There, in my much more quadratic space and restriction from leaving, I gave it its name and its purpose. The cube is a microcosm of me. Outside the cube is everyone and everything else, the motion of networks and their members that all synchronize into a society. Here, there's just me. Realistically, the cube is temporary. You have to leave it at some point, even just to get food. And that requires you to go out and participate in a network. But my generation had an extended stay compared to everyone else in the past, except prisoners. In this microcosm, if you can shrink your perspective to just these four walls, an impossible exercise if you have access to the internet, you get to examine yourself with none of the veneers you wear that help you play your role. Here, there's just you. And looking in the mirror long enough, eventually, any mask you insisted on continuing to wear falls away. There are no excuses in the cube, just raw self. For that reason, the cube has a great purpose. At the time, I wrote in my journal that having entered the cube and foreseeing a prolonged stay, what would emerge at the end of this would be the truth of who I am. Here, in the microcosm of myself and nothing else, who I became isn't in fact a becoming, but a revelation of what is. Who am I? In the silence and stillness, I will uncover that truth. It's a good use of your time in the cube. There's no point in simply killing time until you can get back to quote-unquote real life, since there's nothing more real than this here. I found a void. Maybe you'll disagree with me, but the lesson learned wasn't that no man is an island and that we need others. We need networks to not go crazy, to not fall into a feedback loop that drives us crazy. There is nothing more real than the cube, because if I am real, others don't define me more than who I am in the cube. And the cube, I found, is a bottomless pit. I found a way out, too. In John chapter 1 verse 4 it says, "In him was life, and that life was the light of men." The light implies darkness as the default. John recognized there was no hope in the cube, and about 2020 years later, I finally stopped long enough to see my need of light. I have recently found myself back in the cube. These are stomping grounds I really hoped not to revisit. Here is a lesson I wanted to learn just once. There wasn't another pandemic, not yet, anyway. I just felt the walls close. The future shrink down to barely past present. All the more, or less, thanks to a looping routine of waking up, studying, going to uni, going to the gym, coming home, passing out. Now, I need to get a grip on the beast that is med school, or I'm going to continue failing sideways right to the end. But where in that routine is there time for God? The way out of the cube is the path of true purpose, that defined by He who created us, and that is, in simplest terms, to glorify God. Failing medical school glorifies no one, but letting the thorns entangle me as I walk won't get me very far with respect to what truly matters. And so, there was conflict in the cube. What matters versus what matters most. With what's at stake, maybe you can understand why the solution wasn't so obvious. I'm already sleeping the minimum and zombie crawling my way through the day. Gains at the gym as stagnant as my grades, so there were not extra hours to be mined out of potential. I simply could not serve God and put him on the back burner simultaneously. The lesson hard learned from my first stint in the cube was to put God before all things. And that manifests literally. And there was a time when God's disciples couldn't read and there wasn't a fully compiled Bible to read. But using that fact to justify ignoring the purpose giver all day and try to live my purpose just falls short logically and emotionally, since after all I don't love these four walls. Recently in church, the pastor spoke about identity and how we can so easily lose our identity in the networks we skitter frantically around day to day, year to year. Do we even have a Christian identity if we prioritize it so little that the words our fellow society members use to describe us would not include anything related to the character of He we claim to follow and serve? Let's not lie to ourselves about who we are. There is only me and the truth in the cube, and it's time for a revival.